go to the prophecy real quick. Let's go to Isaiah 19, right? Let's go to Isaiah 19, King James Version. Here goes Isaiah 19. In that day shall Egypt be like unto woman, and it shall be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh. And the land of Judah shall be a terror unto Egypt. Everyone that maketh mention there shall be afraid. Da 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 da, da 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 da. There shall be an altar to the Lord, da da da, to the Lord of hosts, and the Lord of Egypt, for they shall cry unto the Lord, da da da. Let me go to Ezekiel right here. Hold on a second. Look at this, family. Ezekiel 29 verses 19. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this, family. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will give the land of Egypt unto Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Let me repeat. Behold, I will give the land of Egypt unto Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take her multitude, and take her spoil, and take her prey, and it shall be the wages for his army. I have given him the land of Egypt for his labor, wherewith he served against it, because they wrought for me, said the Lord God. What more do you want? He said God gave him the land. God gave him the land. You weren't about that. You said, how? When did God said whatever? There we go. There you go. I'm done with this, man. That's easy work. Let's go back to Jeremiah 43. Let's go back to Jeremiah 43. I will send and take Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will set his throne upon these stones that I have hid, and he shall spread his royal pavilion over them. Boy, I wish he could jump back on. Boy, because I'm about to pull Daniel out. I just got rid of 3 prophets, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Isaiah.
Did the Ezekiel 29:19 through 21 prophecy fail? The first thing I want to do is establish the context of the chapter. Starting at verse 1, it says, in the 10th year, in the 10th month, on the 12th day, and then he proceeds to prophesy about Egypt. But he doesn't name any nations, any kings, or any period in which the prophecy will take place. Then starting at verse 17, he says, in the 27th year, in the 1st month, on the 1st day, which is 16 years after the earlier prophecy, in which he begins to name the Babylonian king. And so these are 2 separate prophecies. You have verses 1 through 16 and verses 19 through 21. Both are about Egypt, but both are not referring to Nebuchadnezzar, at least not in their entirety. The text literally starts speaking about the Babylonian king and warrior starting at verse 18. And so this is the prophecy that I'm going to be dealing with. Let's go ahead and look at the text. Starting at verse 19, it says, therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am going to give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will carry off its wealth. He will loot and plunder the land as pay for his army. I have given him Egypt as a reward for his efforts, because he and his army did it for me, declares the sovereign Lord. Verse 21, on that day I will make a horn grow for the Israelites, and I will open your mouth among them. Then they will know that I am the Lord. So what exactly does it say will happen to Egypt here? There really are just 2 things. Number 1, verse 19, it says, I am going to give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And that same thing is reiterated in verse 20. It says, I have given him Egypt as a reward for his efforts. Number 2, also in verse 19, it says, and he will carry off its wealth. He will loot and plunder the land as pay for his army. So that's 2 things. Number 1, he will give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And number 2, they will carry off its wealth. They will loot and plunder the land. Now, just in case anyone is not clear, when you are able to loot or plunder someone, it follows that they are in your hands, figuratively speaking. In order for number 2 to happen, number 1 would also have to happen. Number 1, is a prerequisite for number 2. Now, before we look at the historical record to see if this happened, first, I want to touch on a few logical fallacies that often happen when people are looking at the Bible. Number 1, the argument from silence. This is an approach called eisegesis, which is an approach where the reader adds preconceived ideas, logical leaps, or other ideas into the text which are not there. The text is silent on specific themes or ideas, yet the reader adds them to his personal commentary as if they are actually in the text. For example, the text doesn't say that the Babylonians will destroy Egypt in this text. This specific text doesn't say that they will capture and burn Egypt to the ground. This text doesn't say that they will capture the Egyptian army. No, this text says that God will give Egypt into the hand of the Babylonians and they will plunder and loot the Egyptians. That's it. The second type of example for this argument from silence fallacy is when a skeptic will say, well, since there are no records of this event, therefore the event didn't happen. Or since the Babylonians or the Egyptians don't have records of this event, therefore the event didn't happen. This is a logical fallacy. It is a historical fact that records from antiquity have been destroyed. It is also a historical fact that a lot of the records which are extant are fragmentary. And so it's bad historical methodology to base conclusions on silence in an archaeological database. Number 2, the argument from authority. It is a logical fallacy to conclude that something is true because authority X says so. That doesn't make something true. And so it doesn't logically follow that because this authority says so makes it true. The argument that this is true or this is false because scholars say so is logically fallacious. Number 3, the argument from ignorance. This is an argument that says, well, because there is no evidence for X, therefore X is not true. Or because X hasn't been proven true, therefore X is false. This is also logically fallacious. So now let's look at the historical record. When did the prophecy take place? Well, based on the text, it happened after the siege of Tyre. If you look at verse 18 of the 29th chapter of Ezekiel, it says, Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, drove his army in a hard campaign against Tyre. Every head was rubbed bare, and every shoulder made raw. Yet he and his army got no reward from the campaign he led against Tyre. The siege of Tyre ended about 573 BC. So this prophecy has to be dated after that time. Let's take a look at the timeline of the Babylonian military activity around that period. In 606 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, who was the crown prince of Babylon, captured Kimahu with an eye towards severing Egyptian communication from Hamath to Carchemish. In 605 BC was the Battle of Carchemish, where the Egyptian and Assyrian armies fought against the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, and the Scythians, and were utterly defeated according to the Babylonian Chronicle and the historian Josephus. Josephus had this to say about the battle. Now in the 4th year of the reign of Jehoiakim, one whose name was Nebuchadnezzar took the government over the Babylonians, who at the same time went up with a great army to the city Carchemish, which was at Euphrates. Upon a resolution he had taken to fight with Necho, king of Egypt, under whom all Syria then was. And when Necho understood the intention of the king of Babylon, and that his expedition was made against him, he did not despise his attempt, who made haste with a great band of men to Euphrates to defend himself from Nebuchadnezzar. And when they had joined battle, he was beaten and lost many 10,000s in the battle. So the king of Babylon passed over Euphrates and took all Syria as far as Pelusium, excepting Judea. That was the same year of the death of the king Nebuchadnezzar, in the ascension year of Nebuchadnezzar. In 601 BC, Nebuchadnezzar marched to Egypt proper. The conflict resulted in heavy losses on both sides, but the Babylonians retreated back to Babylon without having had much success. In 598 BC, Babylon captured Judah and took the king captive to Babylon and replaced him with a new king. According to 2 Kings 24:15 through 17, Nebuchadnezzar took Jehoiachin captive to Babylon, He also took from Jerusalem to Babylon the king's mother, his wives, his officials, and the prominent people of the land. The king of Babylon also deported to Babylon the entire force of 7,000 fighting men, strong and fit for war, and 1,000 skilled workers and artisans. He made Mathaniah, Joachim's uncle, king in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah. In 587 BC, Judea was captured. The walls of Jerusalem were broken down, important buildings, including the temple, were burned, and inhabitants were taken to Babylon. In 586 BC, Babylon sieges Tyre. This siege takes place over a 13-year period and ends in 573 BC, after which the prophecy in Ezekiel 29:19 through 21 is told. So the question becomes, did Babylon attack Egypt proper again after this time? And the answer is yes. In 568 BC, in the 37th year of Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon attacked Egypt again. There is next to nothing recorded for this confrontation, but we do have a text from Babylon which starts with a praise to a deity for the victory. Here's the text, which was published in the Society of Biblical Archaeology, Volume 7, from pages 210 through 225. According to Chronicles of Chaldaean Kings by D.J. Wiseman, which is published in the British Museum, in the absence of chronicle text to follow BM 21946, the only indication of Nebuchadnezzar's later campaigns against Egypt is the text BM 33041, which refers to a Babylonian march in the 37th year of his reign to do battle against Emesis, king of Egypt, who had raised his army. The city of Ptolemy is clearly mentioned in what is otherwise a broken passage. The text was first made known in 1878 and published in Transactions of Society of Biblical Archaeology, Volume 7, by T.G. Pinches, who showed that it referred to an expedition in 568 BC to suppress Emesis, the general set on the Egyptian throne by Nebuchadnezzar after his defeat of Apries in 572 BC, who later revolted. According to Gleason L. Archer in the New International Encyclopedia of Biblical Difficulties, there is also the biographical funerary stela of Neshor in the Louvre, in which this commander in the reign of, see text above, though not furnishing us with an exact date, speaks of an invasion of the Nile Valley by an army of northerners and Asiatics who penetrated so far up the Nile Valley as to threaten the Ethiopian border. The historian Josephus also mentions a military conquest of Egypt by the Babylonians. The dating may be off, but there is strong evidence that Egypt was attacked by Babylon in 568 BC with positive results. There's also the fact that the translators of the Septuagint included Ezekiel, which speaks to the historicity of the prophecies about Egypt. So what is the basis of skeptics' assertion that the Ezekiel 29:19 through 21 prophecy failed? It really is a faith position because there is no evidence to support their assertion. They can only make an argument based on silence in the archaeological record, which I spoke about briefly earlier in the video, but I want to elaborate here. At certain points in history, it was supposed that the Bible was wrong about the Hittites. Here's a quote from Ancient History Encyclopedia. Little was known of the Hittites other than the references from the Bible and fragmentary documentation from Egypt until the late 19th century, when excavations began at Bagasko, which was once the site of Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire. In other words, the secular community thought the Hittites were made up by the biblical writers. At certain points in history, it was supposed that the Bible was wrong about Belshazzar. Here's a quote from creation.com. Years ago, some skeptics denied that there ever was a king of Babylon named Belshazzar, claiming that his name and story were invented by someone unfamiliar with true Babylonian history. The Bible presents the famous writing on the wall episode as occurring on the same day that the city of Babylon, capital of Babylonia, fell to the Medo-Persian Empire under King Cyrus the Great. Indeed, Daniel gave King Belshazzar this interpretation of the writing: God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Verse 26. And your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Verse 28. The Bible claims that Belshazzar was killed that very night. Verse 30. And with his death, the Babylonian kingdom was now controlled by Media Persia. However, all other known historical records once disagreed. Ancient historians like Herodotus, Megasthenes, Berossus, and Alexander Polyster, not to mention a vast number of cuneiform documents, were united in claiming that the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was Nabonidus. Belshazzar was not even mentioned anywhere except in the book of Daniel and literature derived from it. First, in 1854, 4 clay cylinders with identical inscriptions were excavated from Ur. These Nabonidus cylinders contained Nabonidus prayed to the moon god for Belshazzar, the eldest son, my offspring. Thus, Belshazzar's existence was confirmed as Nabonidus' firstborn son and heir to his throne. Then, in 1882, a translation of another ancient cuneiform text, the Nabonidus Chronicle, was published. According to this document, Nabonidus was a mostly absentee king, spending 10 years of his 17-year reign living in Tema, Arabia, 450 miles away from Babylon. The king left Belshazzar, whom the text calls the crown prince, to take care of affairs in Babylon during that time. Also, the chronicle explained that Nabonidus was away from Babylon when it fell. 2 days earlier, he had fled from the Persians when they defeated him at Sippar. So Belshazzar was the highest authority in Babylon at the time of its capture. My confidence in the biblical text is grounded in facts. As I stated previously, the skeptic has no evidential ground to stand on in this case. They have faith commitments to suppose that the prophecy failed, but they have no evidence that it failed.